Okay, does it make sense, students? Okay, now this is what you need to know, right? Is this making sense or not, students? Did you get what I was about to tell you, right? So if you have to calculate, if the question would have asked you, what is the opportunity cost of producing more cars? Now, please focus on my language. What is the opportunity cost of producing more cars? Yes, then you were right that you are giving up on 3,000 units of phones. So that is the opportunity cost. But since the question asked you, what is the opportunity cost of each unit of car? So then you have to, right? Then you have to, Zen, did you get this? Then you have to do this calculation and divide the amount. Think about this. How many units, how many units you're moving down on the y-axis to get how many additional units on the x-axis, right? How many additional units on the x-axis, right? So that is what will tell you, right? So you were giving up on 3,000 units of phones to get 10,000 additional, sorry, 5,000 additional cars. So what you have to do is to, what is the change in y? What is the change in quantity of good y divided by the change in quantity of good x? That will give you per unit opportunity cost of car. One, or, yeah, opportunity cost of basically 1 unit of car. So 3,000 divided by 5,000 will give you 0.6. This means 0.6 units of phones need to be given up on to produce 1 unit of car. Easy? Any confusion? Now let's make this example a little more interesting. And okay. Now, what if I say that now you have wheat and rice, right? So you have wheat and you have rice, and you are moving from B to A. You're moving from B to A. At point B, let's say, let me give you the values, right? On point B, you were making, right, 20,000 units of rice, and let's say 15,000 units of wheat. And now on point A, you are making, let's say, on point A, you are making, let's say, 18 or 22,000 units of wheat, and let's say 16,000 units of rice. So if you're moving from B to A, now this is a slightly different example. I'm saying B to A, moving from B to A, what is the opportunity cost of each unit of wheat? What is the opportunity cost of each unit of wheat? Opportunity cost of each unit of wheat. Can you do this calculation? Right? Quickly do this and or let me know how that will be done. 0.5, right? Not exactly 0.5. It will be slightly different. 4 divided by 7. No, it's not A. 5 plus 2 is 7, right? I did get you. Right, yeah. So that's the correct way. Think about this. So how many units of rice will you need to give up on? If you're moving from B to A, how many units of rice will you be giving up on? You'll be giving up on, right, no problem. You'll be giving up on 4,000 units of rice, and against that 4,000 units of rice, you will be getting additional 7,000 units of wheat. So for each unit of wheat, you have to give up on whatever this answer is, 4 divided by 7, right? You can use your calculators. So that many units of rice you have to give up on to produce 1 more unit of wheat. Is this absolutely clear, students? Is this clear? So you have to be careful that from what point to what point you're moving, right? So if this is the example, if this is the question that is asking for, so how, sorry, if this is the example and you are moving from a point towards the x-axis, if you're moving towards a point on the x-axis towards the x-axis, then you will do change over y over change over x, right? And if this is the example that we're using, then it will become, the formula will become opposite. It would be how many units of good x you are giving up on, so change in x divided by change in y. But even if you do not remember the formula, you can always use it very intuitively, right? You can just see what you're giving up on, that comes in the numerator, divided by what you are gaining, that will be in the denominator, 0.58. Perfect, great, thank you. Right, is this clear? So this calculation showed us that you have to give up on 0.5 units of rice, that can be kg, that can be anything, to get one additional unit or kg of wheat. That is what it said, right? Is this clear? So what I said, the thing that you're giving up on, the product that you're giving up on will be in the numerator, the product that you're giving up on. In this case, you were giving up phones, you're moving from A to B, you were giving up on phones. So how many units of phones you've lost divided by how many additional units of cars you produced, right? And in this example, we reversed the order. Why? Because now you're moving from this point to this point. So the product on the x-axis is what you're giving up on. So as I said, the product that you're giving up on will be in the numerator, how much quantity of the product on the x-axis you gave up on, divided by how many additional units of the product on the y-axis did you gain. That will be in the denominator, right? So this change in x was in the numerator, and this change in y, delta y, meaning change, was in the denominator. Is everyone clear on this? Any confusion so far? Anything not clear? Anything you want to ask me? If we are good on this, then move on and discuss more concepts related to production possibility curve. Okay, perfect, great. Now moving on, students, think about this. Another thing that we have to discuss, that is shifts in production possibility curve. If you remember, yesterday I told you that production possibility curve doesn't stay constant forever, right? So think about this. Just like any other thing, Pakistan uh, is a dynamic economy in the sense that, you know, things are changing on daily basis. We are discovering new resources. We are adopting new technologies and all that stuff. So when that is happening, right? When that is happening, this means that different events and different things will affect our ability to produce. Either our resources are increasing or our resources are decreasing. So that will cause a shift in our production possibility curve. So are you following me? So different things keep happening in a country. Like, for example, let's say Pakistan today discovers new reserves of coal or new reserves of oil or anything of the sort. Then that is a resource that we can use to produce more electricity. That is a resource that we can use to produce more goods and services. Hence, that is a favorable effect on our production potential. That would be something of the sort where we discover more natural resources will be a favorable effect on our production potential, which means that a PPC will shift outwards or inwards. Students, if let's say Pakistan discovers more natural resources, will that cause an outward or an inward shift in our PPC, right? What do you think? So that should cause a, let's do it like this. That should cause obviously an outward shift in our PPC, which means that now we can produce more than what we used to produce. We can produce more than what we used to produce. Are you getting me, right? Is making sense, right? So discovery of more natural resources. Now what we are doing in this topic, we are discussing about all the factors that can, it's really a challenge to make a parallel, right? So what we are discussing in this is that what are the factors that will cause a shift in PPC, and obviously we will understand the logic behind that, right? Rightward or outward shift. Yes, perfect, great, right? So the first thing that we've already discussed, discovery of resources, discovery of natural resources. Okay, what other factors can you think might cause an outward shift, right? What other factors do you think will positively what other factors will positively affect a country's production potential and therefore will cause a rightward shift in PPC? Can you think of any examples? Just give me a second. Right, yeah. Improvement in technology. Absolutely, absolutely. Excellent, right? So what is technology? Technology is basically, it's a very commonly used term and phrase, right? But sometimes it can be difficult to define, right? So technology is any improved method of doing something, Technology is any improved method of doing something, right? So even now we are taking an online class. This is new technology because, previously back in the day, schools and everything used to be just physical. You go to a place where there will be a teacher and the teacher is writing on the board or whatever, right? And you are learning through that process. Now, online classes, online teaching, online learning is a new technology. Another simple example of that could be nowadays in a lot of production processes, we use machines rather than manual production and so on. That is a new technology, right? So improved or new technology again. So that will also obviously cause an outward shift, right? So quantity of resources is the same. Students, now listen to this carefully. In the case of improved technology, the quantity, right? The quantity of the resources have stayed the same. The quantity of land is same in Pakistan. The quantity of capital is same. The quantity of labor is same, but they have improved technology uh, through which they can produce more output. They have become more efficient, right? Labor productivity will increase. Very good. Excellent, right? Another factor that can affect an outward, that can cause an outward shift in PPC is improved human capital. Do you know what human capital is? Improved. Zohan, this is what you were. Obviously, technology will also improve labor productivity, but then there can be something more direct, right? And that is human capital, improved human capital. Have you ever heard the word human capital? Pakistan's human capital, is this, blah, 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 right? So human capital is basically, okay, you haven't. So human capital is the quantity and the quality of human resource that is available in a country, right? So just a second. Human capital is the quantity and the quality. So it includes obviously both things. It's not just about how many people you have, it's also about how well educated and how much qualified, how much trained, and so on they are, right? So human capital is the quantity and quality of human resource, right? So if Pakistan's population is staying constant, but all or majority of the people are becoming more educated, they have access to better healthcare. Healthcare is, by the way, very important in human capital. So human capital is basically determined by two things, right? So the quality of human resource is based on two important factors, right? And I'll tell you how. Education and healthcare. So think about this. Obviously, education will give them all sorts of education, not just going to university or something of the sort. Sometimes it can be vocational education. Vocational education means that you're just learning a skill. So being a plumber, being an electrician doesn't require you to go to a 4 years university program, but that means that you go to a training institute where you learn how to be a plumber, you learn how to be a nurse, right? For nurse, you do go to university, my bad, but vocational training, you got the point, right? Being a carpenter, right? So it requires some skill, right? So that is vocational education. So any sort of education. And healthcare. Why is healthcare important for human capital? Because think about this, the quality of human resource would be directly affected by the fact that how much healthy is your human resource. Do you agree with me or do you not? Right? So obviously, if let's say in Pakistan, the state of healthcare is poor or so on and so forth, right? Then the quality of human capital will be affected. Right, right. Yeah, yeah. Right. So how much qualified they are and how much healthy they are, right? Easy, simple, is it making sense, right? So improvement in human capital will also obviously directly increase a country's production potential and therefore will cause the PPC to shift outwards. Any confusion so far? Any other point that's coming to your mind? So far, we have talked about factors that will cause, right? Or let's change the heading to this, factors causing an outward shift in PPC. Factors causing outward shift in production possibility curve. Right. Any other factor that comes to your mind apart from the ones that we have already listed? Factors causing outward shifts. Right. Anything else? Right. So far we've talked about discovery of natural resources, improved technology, improved human capital, right? So in what is human capital? We just discussed It is the quantity and the quality of human resource available in a country, which is affected by two basic things, education and healthcare, right? Okay, let me think if there is anything else. Yeah, right. Yeah. Okay, so the demand will this cause countries to produce more? Okay, Zohan, so your question is country exports increases, so the demand will this cause the country to produce more? Okay, now that's a good question. So the idea is, Zohan, think about this. So what you are basically asking is that will higher exports cause an outward shift in the PPC or not? And the answer to that is no. And let me tell you why. Think about this. What resources, the resources that a country used to produce products, right, are the same, right? So either those products that are produced in a country can be consumed locally, which we call consumption, or we can sell these products to foreign consumers in other countries. I repeat myself, right? So whatever is being produced in Pakistan, right, that can either be consumed locally or that can be exported to consumers in other parts of the world, right? But for both the things, you are using the same pool of resources that are available in your country, right? Does it make sense? Does it make sense, right? So in that case, your ability to produce has already been accounted for. Your ability to produce has already been accounted for in this PPC diagram. Am I making sense? Right? So your ability to produce had already been accounted for in this diagram, right? If we start importing resources to meet the demand, if we start importing resources to meet the demand. So think about this. If you're importing resource, right, you have to pay for it, right? So, okay, think about this. Think about this. I got your question. Think about this. So trade. So basically what you're talking about, Zohan, is international trade. International trade will not affect a country's production possibility curve, whether you're exporting more or importing more. But what that will do, that will increase your consumption function, right? Consumption possibilities. Now, this can be sound. Consumption possibility curve is not part of our syllabus, right? So I will just try to, explain it in simple words. If you understand, that will be great. Think about this. International trade, let me write this down first, does not affect a country's production possibility curve, but it shifts a country's consumption possibility curve outwards. Sorry, consumption possibility. Yeah, I think that's what I said. Consumption possibility curve outward. Now, what do I mean by that? Consumption possibility. So consumption possibility curve is another graph, right? That's not part of our syllabus. That shows how much a country can consume, right? How much a country can consume, right? Now, you would be asking that, oh, I mean, if you're like your consumption should be directly equal to your production, but sometimes that is not. And that is when you are engaging in international trade. Let me repeat this line. Think about this. So I said international trade does not affect a country's production possibility curve, but it will shift a country's consumption possibility curve outward. So if a country is producing the same as it was, right? So PPC is not shifting, then how come the consumption possibility curve is shifting outwards? The reason for that is, right? The reason for that is that when you export something, you get a better value for that, right? So why would a country primarily be interested in exporting? Because foreign exchange gets you more money, producers make more profit. And why do you want to import anything? Primarily, what's the reason, right? What do? You find the best best supplier in the world. So if you have to buy raw material, if you are business located in Pakistan, you will want to go for local suppliers. But if you find out the local suppliers are more expensive compared to, foreign suppliers, then you'll go for foreign suppliers. And since you're getting your product at a cheaper rate, that would mean that at the end of the day, you can consume more, right? You are selling your products at a higher price, and you can buy more with those with that value, with that money that you generate. So that is how consumption possibility curve shift outward, right? Easy, right? Okay, so the factors that cause this shift, outward shift in production possibility curve, basically discovery of more natural resources, improved technology, improved human capital, which can be further broken down into two parts: better education and better healthcare, right? Better education, better healthcare. So these are all the factors that will cause an outward shift in your PPC. Now let's quickly also discuss what factors can cause an inward shift in PPC, right? Just like there can be increased production potential of a country, there can also be a country's production potential can also deteriorate. A country's production potential can also deteriorate over time. Very good, perfect, easy, great. Okay, now think about this. Let me write this down. So can you start telling me what factors do you think can cause a deterioration or decrease in country's production potential? Cause an inward shift in PPC. Right. Natural disaster. Absolutely. Absolutely. So one factor that will cause an inward shift, then, are you following? In PPC is natural disaster. So think about this. Depending upon the scale and depending upon the severity of that natural disaster, right, that will determine how much inward shift will it cause, right? So, I mean, from very, not very small, but I was just about to say that ranging from minor flooding to something very, catastrophic, like a cyclone or something of the sort, right? An earthquake, right? So depending upon how much severe it is, that will destroy your resources, that will take some human lives, that will take away your resources, like cattle is a major resource, right? For farming and cattle farming and all that. So, I mean, that depends. It will cause an inward shift. Okay. Depletion of natural resources, right? Absolutely. Very good. So think about this. The word depletion is used for non-renewable resources, right? So there are two terms that we'll be using again and again: depletion and depreciation, right? So anything that can't be renewed, we use the word, right, depletion. So think about this. The quantity of natural resource in a country is always fixed, right? So quantity of oil in Pakistan is fixed, the quantity of coal, because these are all natural resources, right? And we can't increase their quantity, right? So if these resources start to deplete, then over years, for future generations of Pakistan, the ability to produce will be, right, will be less compared to what it is right now. Death rate increase and birth rates also decrease, lower working population, right? Right, death rate, I think you were saying death rate increased. Death rate is decreasing, right? So less people are dying, birth rates also decrease. Right. So the middle population, right? So let's put it in more simple words. That's correct. So decrease in working population, right? So decrease in working population slash brain drain. Have you ever heard the word brain drain? Decrease in working population. Just a second. Decrease in working population slash brain drain, right? Is this right? Okay. So brain drain is basically a term used to define how people of developing countries, obviously normally brain drain happens in developing countries, how people of developing countries leave for more developed countries. They leave for more developed countries, right? In search of better economic opportunities, in search of better livelihood and all that, right? Is it making sense, students? Decrease in working population could be because of different reasons, like the women participation rate in labor force has decreased, or the birth rates have decreased a lot, and things like that. Or people are now undertaking more education. So working population, very simply speaking, do you know exactly the definition of working population? If not, let me quickly write this down for you. So working population is number of people who are willing and eligible to work. Or let's bring eligible first. So working population of a country comprises of all people who are eligible and willing to work, right? Comprises of in a country who are eligible, right? And willing to work. Now, let me quickly tell you, think about this. So do you know what is the minimum legal age to work in Pakistan? Eligible and willing to work, right? So what is the legal minimum age for work in Pakistan? Okay, let's see if you know this, right? 18, no, it's not 18, it's not 17, it is 14 years, right? So if anyone is working below the age of 14, only that will be considered as child labor. But anything 14 plus is not, right? And that is how I know, right? Yeah, exactly. And that is how I know, because there was a public service message going on the radio, television, and that clearly defined um, that child labor is below the age of 14, right? Right. So does it make sense, students? So think about this. Okay. So comprise of all individuals in the country who are eligible. So anyone below the age of 14 would obviously not be part of working population. That's very simple, right? Similarly, if the government has defined retirement age to be 60, depending upon the situation, you might not be even eligible to work above 60, right? And normally you can work, I mean, it totally depends. Government organizations retire you after 60, but for private organizations, there's no limit. If you're doing well, if you're experienced, if you want to continue working, they have no problem with that, right? And willing to work. So think about this. So why is this thing separate from this, right? Let's quickly have a look at this. So what age do you guys go to university, right? So normally students go to universities by age of 17 or 18, and then for 4 years they graduate by the age of 22 or 23, right? Now what happens is that majority people, not majority, but those who are going to universities in Pakistan, right, 19, right, so they don't start working until they have gotten their university degrees, right? So for you all, the idea would be go to university, get your bachelor's, and then start working, then join the labor force. So even though you will be eligible, since I'm assuming you're already above 15, 14, so you're eligible to work, right? But you're not willing to work because you're undertaking higher education or whatever, right? So you're not willing to work. Same goes for women who are eligible to work, who are between the age group, but they're not willing to work, right? So that means that they are not part of the working population. Is this simple, right? Is it simple? Great. Right? Can we move on? So decrease in working population for any reason, right? Or there's brain drain, which means people are leaving the country, going to other countries, right? So these are the three factors: natural disasters, we talked about this, depletion of natural resources, right? Decrease in working population, right? So these are the factors that will cause an inward shift in your production possibility curve. Is this simple? And then you can call some other things, right? Wars, right? That also destroy resources and so on, right? Natural disasters, wars, like natural calamities. Okay, are we good on this? Okay, now one last thing that we're left in the topic of production possibility curve, and then we'll be done, right? So have a look at this, students. Now we have so far looked at only one possible shape of PPC. So far we have only talked about a downward sloping curve. What have we talked about? Right? So far, we have only talked about PPC, that's a curve, but that is not always the case. Now, that is where things become a little interesting. So far, we have talked about a PPC that looks like this. Is this making sense, students? Okay, so we'll wrap it up before that. Okay. Now, you have cell phones and you have cars. So this is the shape of PPC that we have looked at so far. But another form or shape of PPC can be a straight down sloping line, right? Another possible shape that PPC can take is straight down sloping line. Now there's a slight difference between the two. There's a slight difference between these two types of PPC. Let me explain you what's the difference. Okay, think about it. So if I have to write cars and right, it should be good, but let's make it more clear, right? Wheat, right? So let's say on the left hand side you're making wheat and cars. On the right PPC you're making rice and let's say, let's not take wheat. So you're making cars and aeroplanes. And on the right hand side of the graph, you're making wheat and rice. Okay, now students, have a look at this. Now, the difference between the two possible shapes of PPC is that if it's a curve, if the PPC is a curve like this on the right hand side, right, compared to straight down sloping line. In the case of a curve, the two products are not related, which means that they're not using similar resources. Let me repeat that for you. So if the PPC looks like this, right, it means that it's not using the two products that we have shown on the graph, like aeroplanes and cars, are not using similar resources, and therefore these two products are not related, and therefore we can say that resources are immobile, which means that you can't cut resources from cars and use all of those resources neatly for using aeroplanes. Are you getting what I'm trying to say? The two products are not related in the sense that they do not use similar type of resources. I'll explain you how. Resources are immobile, right? In the case of a curve, it shows that resources are immobile, which means that you cannot transfer resources from the production of one product neatly towards the production of the other product, right? Right? So think about this. What type of products do you need in cars? Obviously, you need, the engine of a car, right? But if you think about the engine of an airplane, that's way more bigger, that's way more complicated, and so on, right? If you think of cars, then you need tires. You also need tires in airplanes, but you're getting my point, right? So the products, or if I would have chosen a better example over here, right? Let's even forget about that, right? What about clothes? So if you think about clothes, and you think about, the resources that you need to produce clothes versus the resources that you need to produce cars, these are absolutely completely different from each other. Do you agree with me, right? So that's why I've said that resources are immobile. You can't transfer resources from the production of one product or vice versa from the production of one product towards the production of the other product. Is this making sense? Students, is this making sense, right? And another thing is, in this case, that there is increasing opportunity cost. Now, this is where it will get a little tricky. So in the case of a curve, there will always be increasing opportunity cost. There will be increasing opportunity cost, right? Now, what do I mean by that? Think about this. So let me ask you a simple question. A, B, C, D, and E. Every time you produce more units of cars, so let's say you're moving this way, you're moving from A to B to C and D and E, right? Every time you're producing more cars, are you always giving up the same quantity of clothes? I repeat myself. Every time you produce more cars, moving from A to B, my question is, are you giving up the same quantity of clothes, or does it change when you move towards the E point, right? Right? So if you got this thing, then it will be clear. No. So it changes. Yes, Zohan. So gradient, one technical way to explain this would be the gradient, right? So have a look at this. So gradient of this line is less steep at point A. It slightly starts becoming more steep, which basically means what? That means that the more you produce one type of goods for the curve, we're talking about the curve PPC, the more you produce one type of the curve, one type of the product, you have to give up more units of the other good. When you're moving from A to E, every time you are producing one additional unit of car, you are giving up on more units of clothes. That is what increasing opportunity cost means. It's not constant. It's not that for every 1 unit of car, you are always giving up on 2 units of clothes. No, 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 no. Between A to B, think about this. You gave up on this many units of clothes, and you got this many units of cars. Then moving from B to C, you gave up on this many units of clothes to get this many units of cars. Then similarly for C, but for look at D, moving from D to E means you have to give up on this many units of clothes, and you will only get a little more units of cars. So what it basically means that when you're moving from one axis to another axis, in the case of a curve, the opportunity cost is increasing, which means every time you produce one additional unit of car, you are giving up on more units of clothes. You're giving up on more units of clothes. Does this help? Students, does this help? Right? Whereas when it's a straight downward sloping line, these 2 points become reversed, like they are opposite of that. Firstly, in the case of a straight downward sloping line, resources are mobile, which means, think about this. If you have to shift resources between producing wheat and rice, both need fertile land, both need fertilizers, both need water for irrigation, both need things like that. So in this case, resources are mobile when it's a straight downward sloping line. Students, are you following me then? Right? And the second thing is that you have constant opportunity cost. Now, what does word constant means? Constant opportunity cost means that every time you produce one additional unit of rice, let's say, you will always be giving up on the same units of wheat. Whether that be 2 units or 3 units, that's a different thing. But every additional unit of rice would always cost you the same quantity of wheat, nothing more, nothing less. But in the case of a curve, producing additional units of cars, each additional unit of car will be costing you more units of clothes, will be costing you more units of clothes. Students, did you get me or not? The PED of graph 2 is 1. The PED of graph 2. No. Doesn't necessarily have to be 1. Doesn't necessarily have to be 1. Doesn't necessarily have to be 1. So you are saying that one additional unit of rice, 1 would mean one additional unit of rice would cost you 1 unit of wheat. Right? Whatever it is, it can be 2 units of wheat you have to give up to produce 1 unit of rice. But whatever it is, it will always stay constant. Now, if you want a proof of that, we can do that, but that would take another class, right? And that is not exactly part of a syllabus, but we can totally do that if you're interested, right? But apart from that, what you need to remember that there are 2 possible shapes of PPC. One is a curve. In the case of a curve, resources are immobile, which means that you can't easily transfer resources from the production of cars to the production of clothes and vice versa, because they are using different type of resources and there will be increasing opportunity cost, right? On the other hand, for the straight downward sloping line, resources are mobile because these are similar products, so they will be using similar resources and there is constant opportunity cost. Each additional unit of rice will always cost you the same quantity of wheat, nothing more, nothing less. Easy, we're good, right? Okay, so we'll stop here for today. And then if there's any confusion tomorrow, we can do some calculations for this tomorrow, right? And then move forward, right? Good on this? Okay, so students, I'll see you tomorrow. Take care. Have a good night. Take care. Allah Hafiz.